Hey there, and welcome to the Magic Snail Channel. This is where we share real life stories about people dealing with all kinds of situations. Some are funny, some are messy, and some are downright unbelievable. If you like hearing stories that feel real and keep you curious, you'll feel right at home here. So go ahead, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want more. We've got plenty of stories waiting for you.
2:30 a.m. The fluorescent light in my garage buzzed like an angry wasp as I torqued the last lug nut on Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick. 23 years of fixing cars in this dying Rust Belt town, and I still found peace in the simple logic of engines. Unlike people, cars didn't lie to you. My phone vibrated against the workbench. Sarah's name lit up the screen. "I'm at John's house. Come pick me up or we're done." I stared at those words for a full minute, grease-stained fingers hovering over the keyboard. My wife of 18 years texting me from my best friend's house at 2:30 in the morning, the same best friend who'd been acting weird for months, avoiding eye contact, making excuses not to grab beers after work. I typed back, "We're done then." The garage fell silent except for that annoying buzzing light. I took a screenshot of her location, then scrolled through my contacts until I found John's wife, Monica. She was 8 months pregnant with their second kid. Poor woman deserved to know what kind of man she married. I sent her the screenshot with a simple message. "Thought you should see this." Then I cracked open a beer and waited. My phone started ringing within minutes. Sarah's panicked voice cut through the static. "Danny, what did you do? Monica's going crazy, throwing things." I hung up and turned off my phone. Nothing gets the adrenaline moving like your wife's 2 a.m. booty call to another man, I thought, taking a long swig of beer. The taste was bitter, but not as bitter as the realization that my marriage had been a lie for God knows how long. Outside, the streetlights cast long shadows across our quiet suburban neighborhood. Houses full of sleeping families, people who still believed in happily ever after. I used to be one of them. The Buick sat there like a patient old dog, waiting for its owner to reclaim it. At least someone would be happy tomorrow, Mrs. Henderson would get her car back, purring like new, and drive off into her simple, uncomplicated life. I envied her. By sunrise, I knew my life as I'd known it was over. What I didn't know was that I was about to become someone I'd never imagined, someone who'd make them all pay for what they'd taken from me. The next morning hit like a sledgehammer to the skull. I woke up on the garage couch, neck stiff, mouth tasting like stale beer and betrayal. My phone had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Sarah had been busy. "Danny, please call me. We need to talk." "This is all a misunderstanding. You're destroying our family. The kids are asking questions." I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. Then I saw the Facebook notifications. My blood turned to ice water. Monica hadn't just confronted John. She'd posted everything, screenshots of Sarah's location, timestamps, even photos of Sarah's car in their driveway. The post had been shared 47 times in our small town of 12,000 people. "Ladies, this is what happens when your husband's best friend decides to be a homewrecker. Danny Peterson, thank you for showing me who my husband really is." The comments were brutal. Our neighbors, Sarah's coworkers, people from our church, everyone was weighing in. Some supported Monica. Others called her crazy. A few blamed me for airing dirty laundry in public. My daughter Emma had texted at 6 a.m., "Dad, everyone at school is talking about it. Mom says you ruined everything. Why did you do this?" I stared at that message for 10 minutes. How do you explain to your 17-year-old daughter that sometimes the truth is messier than the lie? That sometimes good people do terrible things and sometimes the only justice you get is the kind you make yourself? I typed back, "Your mother made her choice. I just made sure the right people knew about it." The bell above my shop door chimed. I looked up to see my longtime customer, Bill Martinez, standing in the doorway with an uncomfortable expression. "Hey, Danny, I hate to do this, but my wife saw that Facebook thing, and she thinks maybe I should take my truck somewhere else for a while, until things settle down." I nodded slowly. "I understand, Bill. It's nothing personal, you know. It's just that people love a scandal more than they love a good tune-up," I finished. "Don't worry about it." Bill shuffled his feet, clearly wanting to say more, but settled for a weak wave as he left. 3 more customers canceled that day. By evening, my appointment book looked like Swiss cheese. I locked up early and drove to the Rusty Anchor, the dive bar where John and I had been drinking together every Friday for the past decade. The place smelled like stale cigarettes and broken dreams, but the beer was cold, and nobody asked stupid questions. Tommy, the bartender, slid a Bud Light across the scarred wooden bar without being asked. "Rough day?" he said. "You could say that." "Heard about the Facebook thing. Monica really went nuclear, huh?" I took a long drink. Can't say I blame her. "John's been in here twice today. Looks like heck. Keeps saying it's all a big misunderstanding." "Yeah? What kind of misunderstanding involves my wife being at his house at 2:30 in the morning?" Tommy shrugged. "The kind that ruins friendships, I guess." The bar door opened, and I turned to see Coach Peterson, no relation despite the name, walking in. He ran the old boxing gym where I'd been working out for the past 5 years, trying to keep the middle-aged spread at bay. "Heard you might need someone to talk to," he said, taking the stool next to mine. "News travels fast in this town. Faster than gossip at a church potluck." He ordered a whiskey, neat. "You know, I've seen a lot of guys go through rough patches. The ones who come out okay are the ones who hit back smart, not stupid." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means don't let them win by making you do something dumb. You want justice? Make it count." I stared into my beer, thinking about Sarah's texts, about my customers walking away, about my daughter's disappointed face. They wanted me to be the villain in this story? Fine. But villains don't just roll over and take it. Villains fight back. John's hardware store sat on Main Street like a monument to small-town success. 3 generations of the Brennan family had run the place, and John had expanded it into the biggest operation within 50 miles. Shiny new trucks in the parking lot, fresh paint on the building, a big sign advertising their family values. Family values. The irony wasn't lost on me. I found him at the loading dock behind the store, signing for a delivery of lumber. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Red-rimmed eyes, wrinkled clothes, the kind of 5 o'clock shadow that screamed, "My life is falling apart." "Good. Danny." He straightened up when he saw me, trying to look casual. "Listen, we need to talk about what happened." "What happened?" I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "What happened is my wife was at your house at 2:30 in the morning, and now my business is tanking because half the town thinks I'm some kind of psycho for telling your pregnant wife about it." It wasn't what it looked like. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Really? Then what was it, John? What was my wife doing at your house in the middle of the night?" He glanced around nervously, probably hoping one of his employees would interrupt us. "She was upset about you working late all the time, about feeling neglected. She just needed someone to talk to. And you were the shoulder she chose to cry on? Danny, come on. We've been friends for 20 years. Friends don't screw their friends' wives." The delivery driver was pretending not to listen, but I could see him slowing down his work to catch every word. John's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot. "This is Sarah's location history from the past 3 months. Guess whose address shows up 17 different times, always late at night or when I was out of town?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You want to keep pretending this was innocent?" I stepped even closer. "Fine, but we both know the truth, and now Monica knows it too. You destroyed my marriage." "I destroyed your marriage?" The rage that had been building for 24 hours finally boiled over. "You destroyed your own marriage when you decided to sleep with my wife." I shoved him hard. He stumbled backward, tripping over a stack of 2x4s and landing on his A in the gravel. "You ruined my family," I said, standing over him. So I figured it was only fair to return the favor. John scrambled to his feet, his face twisted with anger. "You always were a jealous piece of crap. Sarah told me how miserable you made her, how you never appreciated what you had." I slapped him. Hard. The sound echoed off the loading dock like a sharp crack. His phone flew out of his hand and shattered against the concrete. "You want to know what I appreciate?" I said quietly. "I appreciate honesty. Something you wouldn't recognize if it bit you on the A." John touched his cheek, staring at me with a mixture of shock and hatred. "You're going to regret this, Danny. The only thing I regret is not figuring out what kind of man you really are 20 years ago." I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there among the scattered lumber and broken glass. Behind me, I heard him yelling something about calling the cops, but I didn't care. The security camera mounted above the loading dock had recorded everything, but I'd been careful. He'd thrown the first verbal punch, and I'd only defended myself. Any decent lawyer could spin it as justified. Not that it mattered. In a town this size, reputation was everything, and John's was about to take another hit. I had plans for that. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a smug little process server who looked like he enjoyed ruining people's days. Sarah wanted everything: the house, half the business, alimony, even my truck. I sat in my empty kitchen, reading through the legal jargon while drinking coffee that tasted like motor oil. 18 years of marriage reduced to a stack of papers and a list of assets to be divided. My phone rang. Sarah's lawyer, some hotshot from the city, who probably charged more per hour than I made in a week. Mr. Peterson, this is Jennifer Walsh representing your wife. I think we should discuss a settlement that works for everyone. What kind of settlement? Well, given the circumstances, your public humiliation of Mrs. Peterson, the damage to her professional reputation, we're prepared to be reasonable. Sign over the house and half the business, agree to monthly alimony payments, and we can make this quick and painless. I almost laughed. Painless for who? Mr. Peterson, I understand you're upset, but fighting this will only make things more expensive and more public. Do you really want your personal business dragged through court? Lady, my personal business is already the top story on the town Facebook page. What else you got? There was a pause. Perhaps you should consult with an attorney before making any hasty decisions. Perhaps you should tell your client that I'm not rolling over just because she says so. I hung up and immediately called my bank. Time to do some asset protection of my own. The joint checking account had $23,000 in it. I transferred $11,500 to my personal account. Exactly half, nothing illegal about it. Then I called the credit card companies and canceled every shared card we had. Sarah called within an hour, screaming, "What did you do? My card was declined at the grocery store." I protected my assets, something your lawyer probably should have advised you to do before serving me papers. Danny, this is insane. We can work this out. Work what out? You've been screwing my best friend for months, maybe years. You want to take my house, my business, everything I've worked for? What exactly is there to work out? I made a mistake. No, Sarah. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. What you did was make a choice. Multiple choices. And now you get to live with the consequences. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I drove to the Rusty Anchor to celebrate my newfound freedom. The bar was busier than usual for a Thursday afternoon. Word had gotten around about the divorce papers, and everyone wanted to see how I was handling it. Small towns were like that. Other people's misery was the best entertainment available. I was 3 beers in when she walked in. Lisa Chen owned the lumber yard on the other side of town, John's biggest competitor. She was smart, ruthless, and had been trying to put him out of business for the past 5 years. She was also, I realized as she sat down next to me, exactly the kind of ally I needed. "Heard you're having some legal troubles," she said, ordering a vodka tonic. "News travels fast. Faster when it involves John Brennan." She turned to face me, her dark eyes calculating. "You know, I might be able to help you with that." "What kind of help?" "The kind that involves making sure John's hardware store has some serious problems in the near future." I studied her face. Lisa had always been direct, but this felt different, more personal. "What's in it for you?" "John's been undercutting my prices by buying stolen merchandise. I've been trying to prove it for months, but he's careful. Now that his world is falling apart, he might get sloppy. And you think I can help with that?" "I think a man with nothing left to lose can be very motivated." She slid a business card across the bar. "Call me when you're ready to stop playing defense and start playing offense." She finished her drink and left, but the card stayed on the bar in front of me, like a loaded tool waiting to be picked up. I thought about Sarah's lawyer, about the divorce papers, about John's smug face when he thought he was getting away with it. Then I picked up the card. Lisa's lumberyard was everything John's hardware store pretended to be: efficient, modern, and profitable. Her office overlooked the main floor, where forklifts moved pallets of materials with military precision. "You came," she said when I knocked on her door Friday morning. "I'm here. Now tell me what you know about John." She gestured to a chair across from her desk. "Coffee? Just the information." Lisa smiled, the kind of smile that made me understand why she'd been so successful in a male-dominated business. John's been buying merchandise from a guy named Rick Torres. Rick runs a crew that finds construction materials from job sites around the region. You mean steals? I mean finds. The paperwork is all legitimate, on the surface. But the prices are too good to be true, and John's been passing those savings on to customers to undercut my business. I lean back in my chair. Why haven't you gone to the police? Because Rick is careful and John's got friends in the sheriff's department. I needed someone on the inside, someone John trusted. She paused. Or used to trust. What do you want me to do? John's getting desperate. His wife kicked him out, his reputation is shot, and his business is starting to suffer. Desperate men make mistakes. She slid a folder across the desk. I need you to get me proof of what he's been doing. I opened the folder. Inside were photographs of trucks making deliveries to John's store, invoices with suspicious pricing, and a list of construction sites that had reported thefts. This is a lot of work for someone who just wants to hurt a competitor. Lisa's expression hardened. John's not just my competitor, Danny. He's also the reason my brother lost his construction business 3 years ago. What happened? John accused my brother of selling substandard materials that caused a roof collapse. It was a lie. John had sold those materials himself, through Rick's operation. But he had better lawyers and more friends in town. My brother went bankrupt defending himself. Now I understood. This wasn't just about business, it was personal. So what's the plan? John's meeting with Rick tomorrow night at the store, supposedly to discuss expanding their arrangement. I need photos, recordings, anything that proves what they're doing. And then? Then we destroy him. Completely. I thought about Sarah's demands, about losing my customers, about John's face when he tried to justify sleeping with my wife. What do you need me to do? Lisa's smile returned sharper than before. I need you to be exactly what this town thinks you are. A man with nothing left to lose. The plan was simple. I would break into John's store after hours and plant recording devices in his office. When he met with Rick, we'd have everything we needed to end his career and probably send him to prison. It was also completely illegal. You understand what you're asking me to do? I said. I'm asking you to get justice, for both of us. I stared at the folder in my hands, photos of stolen materials, invoices for merchandise that had been taken from honest contractors, evidence of a scheme that had been going on for years while John presented himself as a pillar of the community. When do we start? Saturday night, 11 p.m. John's hardware store sat dark and empty on Main Street, security lights casting long shadows across the parking lot. I sat in my truck a block away, watching for any sign of movement. Lisa had given me everything I needed, a key copied from an employee who owed her money, the security code from a disgruntled former worker, and recording equipment small enough to hide behind the filing cabinets in John's office. This was insane. If I got caught, I'd lose everything, my business, my kids' respect, probably my freedom. But sitting there in the darkness, I realized I'd already lost everything that mattered. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Danny, please, we need to talk. The kids are asking questions I can't answer. I turned off the phone. The alley behind the store was deserted. I parked my truck 3 blocks away and walked back, keeping to the shadows. The key Lisa had given me worked perfectly. The back door opened without a sound. Inside, the store felt different in the darkness. Familiar aisles of tools and hardware supplies looked threatening, like a maze designed to trap intruders. I made my way to John's office, using the flashlight app on my phone to navigate. The security code worked on the first try. I was inside John's private office, surrounded by 20 years of friendship turned to betrayal. Photos on his desk showed happier times. John and Monica at their wedding, their first kid taking his first steps, the 3 of us at a baseball game last summer. Before everything went to heck, I planted the first recording device behind his computer monitor, the second inside his desk drawer, and the third underneath his conference table. Lisa had assured me they were voice-activated and would record for up to 72 hours. I was about to leave when I heard voices outside. My blood turned to ice. Someone was coming. I ended the flashlight and crouched behind John's desk, heart pounding like a jackhammer. The voices got closer, John and another man I didn't recognize. Told you this was a bad time, John was saying. Half the town thinks I'm some kind of monster. That's exactly why we need to expand the operation, the other voice replied. You need money, and I need a reliable outlet. This works for both of us. They were coming inside. I looked around frantically for another exit, but there was nowhere to go. John's office had one door, and they were about to walk through it. The lights came on in the main store. I heard John disarming the security system, then footsteps heading toward the office. I was trapped. The office door opened, and John walked in with a man I'd never seen before. Tall, thin, with the kind of face that screamed criminal to anyone with half a brain. Jesus Christ! John jumped backward when he saw me crouched behind his desk. "Hello, John," I said, standing up slowly. "What the heck are you doing here?" "Funny story. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by to see how business was going." The other man stepped forward, his hand moving toward his jacket. "Who is this guy?" "This is Danny Peterson," John said. "My former best friend and current pain in the A. The one whose wife you've been screwing?" I looked at John with mock surprise. "You told him about that? How thoughtful. Danny, you need to leave, now." "Actually, I think I'll stay. This conversation sounds fascinating." I sat down in John's chair and put my feet up on his desk. "Please continue. You were saying something about expanding your operation?" The thin man looked at John nervously. "We should do this another time." No, I said. "Don't let me interrupt. I'm just here to listen." John's face was turning red. "Get out of my store, Danny." "Or what? You'll call the cops?" "That should be interesting." "Officer, I'd like to report an intruder who caught me meeting with a guy who looks like he steals things for a living." The thin man was already backing toward the door. "I'm out of here." "Rick, wait!" John started after him, but Rick was already gone. We stared at each other across the desk. 20 years of friendship reduced to this moment of pure hatred. "You just cost me a lot of money," John said quietly. "Good. Consider it interest on what you stole from me." "I never stole anything from you." I laughed. "You stole my wife. You stole my peace of mind. You stole my trust." I stood up and walked around the desk until we were face to face. "But most of all, you stole my belief that people can be decent." John's hands clenched into fists. "Sarah came to me, Danny. She was miserable with you. So you decided to help her out. I decided to be there for someone who needed me. How noble." I stepped closer. "Tell me, John, when you were being there for my wife, did you think about Monica, about your kids, about the fact that she's 8 months pregnant with your child?" Something snapped in his eyes. He swung at me, but I was ready for it. I caught his wrist and twisted, sending him stumbling into the wall. "You always were a lousy fighter," I said. He came at me again, this time catching me in the ribs with a wild haymaker. The air rushed out of my lungs, but I managed to grab him and slam him against the filing cabinet. We wrestled for a few seconds, knocking over chairs and scattering papers until I got him in a headlock and squeezed until he stopped struggling. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, breathing hard. "You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to stay away from me, and you're going to pray that I don't decide to tell everyone in town about your friend Rick and his discount merchandise." I let him go and headed for the door. "This isn't over," he called after me. I turned back. "You're right, it's not." The recordings Lisa and I made that night were better than we'd hoped. Not only did we catch John discussing his arrangement with Rick, but we also got him admitting to selling stolen materials and bribing a building inspector to overlook code violations. It was enough to destroy him completely. But I wanted more than just justice. I wanted revenge. "We should take this to the police," Lisa said when we met at her office Monday morning. "Not yet. Danny, this is everything we need. This is everything we need to put him in prison. But prison's too easy. I want him to lose everything first, the way I did. I want him to know what it feels like to watch his whole world collapse." Lisa studied my face. "What did you have in mind?" "How many people in this town do business with John's store?" "Most of them. He's got the best prices in the region. Because he's selling stolen merchandise. What happens when those customers find out their building materials came from theft? What happens when the insurance companies start asking questions about claims involving John's materials?" Understanding dawned in Lisa's eyes. "They'll sue him into bankruptcy, and then we call the police." We spent the next week carefully leaking information. Lisa had contacts throughout the construction industry, people who'd been hurt by John's unfair pricing. I had customers who trusted my judgment about local businesses. By Friday, rumors were spreading like wildfire. John's store was selling stolen goods. The materials were substandard. Insurance claims were being investigated. Lawsuits were being filed. John's parking lot, usually full of contractor trucks, sat nearly empty. I was at the Rusty Anchor celebrating this small victory when my daughter Emma walked in. She looked older than her 17 years, tired and angry in a way that broke my heart. "Dad, we need to talk." I followed her to a booth in the back, away from the curious stares of the other patrons. "Mom says you're trying to destroy John's business out of spite." "Your mother says a lot of things." "Is it true?" I looked at my daughter. Sarah's eyes, my stubborn chin, a combination of the best and worst of both of us. "John destroyed our family, Emma. He and your mother made choices that hurt all of us. I'm just making sure there are consequences for those choices. By ruining his life? By holding him accountable." Emma shook her head. "This isn't who you used to be, Dad. No, it's not. The man I used to be trusted people. He believed his friends were loyal and his wife was faithful. That man was an idiot. That man was my father." Her words hit me harder than John's punch had. I reached across the table, but she pulled her hand away. "Emma, Mom's moving to Chicago. She got a job with a big law firm there. What about you and your brother? She wants us to come with her, start fresh, away from all this drama." The room seemed to spin around me. Losing Sarah was one thing. Our marriage had been dying long before I caught her cheating. But losing my kids? What do you want to do? "I want my family back together. I want things to go back to the way they were." Tears started running down her cheeks. But that's not going to happen, is it? I wanted to lie to her, to promise that everything would work out, that we could rebuild what had been broken. But she deserved better than false hope. "No, sweetheart, it's not." She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Then I guess I'll see you when I see you." She left me sitting in that booth, staring at my reflection in the window, wondering if revenge was worth losing everything else that mattered. The answer came to me Tuesday morning when I found my shop windows covered in spray paint. "Cheater" and "liar" in bright red letters across the glass I'd kept spotless for 20 years. John's handiwork, no doubt. His final act of defiance before his world collapsed completely. I called Lisa. "It's time. You sure?" "I'm sure." We met at the police station that afternoon with copies of all our recordings, photographs of the stolen merchandise, and a detailed timeline of John's criminal activities. Detective Morrison, a guy I'd known since high school, listened to everything with a grim expression. "This is solid evidence, Danny. We can arrest him tonight. There's one more thing I want to do first." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "What kind of thing?" "The kind that's perfectly legal, but probably not very nice." That evening, I drove to the trailer park where Sarah was staying with her mother. The place was a monument to broken dreams, rusty mobile homes, weedy lots, and the kind of desperate poverty that made people do stupid things. Sarah answered the door, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past month. "Good. Danny, I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk." She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "If this is about the kids moving to Chicago, it's about a lot of things." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo Lisa had taken of John meeting with Rick. "Like your boyfriend's side business, selling stolen merchandise." Her face went white. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that John's been running a criminal operation out of his hardware store. The police are going to arrest him tomorrow morning." "You're lying." I played one of the recordings. John's voice filled the air, discussing prices for stolen lumber and bribes for building inspectors. Sarah sank onto the trailer's front steps. "Oh my God. The man you threw away our marriage for is going to prison, Sarah. Was it worth it?" She looked up at me with eyes full of tears and rage. "You did this. You destroyed him. I exposed him. There's a difference. You're a monster." I knelt down so we were eye to eye. I'm a man who got tired of being lied to, by his wife, by his best friend, by everyone he trusted. The kids will never forgive you for this. Maybe not, but they'll know their father isn't a pushover. They'll know that actions have consequences. I stood up and walked back to my truck, leaving her sitting there in the gathering darkness. One more stop to make. John's house, his former house, sat dark and empty. Monica had moved back in with her parents after throwing him out, taking the kids and leaving him with nothing but a mortgage he couldn't afford, and neighbors who crossed the street to avoid him. I found him at his store, sitting in his office with a bottle of whiskey and a stack of unpaid bills. He looked up when I walked in, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "Come to gloat. Come to say goodbye." He laughed bitterly. "Going somewhere?" "Thailand. Bought a ticket this afternoon." "Running away?" I sat down across from him. Moving on, there's a difference. John poured himself another drink with shaking hands. The police came by today, asked a lot of questions about Rick Torres and some missing building materials. What did you tell them? The truth. What else could I tell them? He looked at me with something that might have been respect. You really screwed me over, Danny. You screwed yourself over. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Sarah's leaving town, taking the kids to Chicago. I heard. Monica won't let me see my children. Says I'm not a fit father. Are you? He didn't answer. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Two men who'd once been brothers, now reduced to this. A final conversation in a failing business, surrounded by the wreckage of choices that couldn't be undone. Why Thailand? John asked finally. Because it's far away from here. Because nobody there knows my story or cares about my mistakes. I stood up. Because sometimes the only way to win is to walk away from the game. What about your business? Your life here? My life here ended the night Sarah texted me from your house. Everything since then has just been cleanup. I headed for the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, John, I'm sorry it came to this. No, you're not. He was right. I wasn't sorry at all. The next morning, Detective Morrison called to tell me John had been arrested on charges of receiving stolen property, bribery, and tax evasion. He'd be looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted. Lisa called an hour later to tell me she'd bought John's store from the bank for pennies on the dollar. She was planning to turn it into a second location for her lumberyard. What about your brother? I asked. He's moving back to town, going to manage the new location. Justice served with a side of irony. I spent my last day in town cleaning out my garage and saying goodbye to the few friends I had left. Most people avoided me now, some because they blamed me for the drama, others because they were afraid of what I might do if they crossed me. Coach Peterson was the exception. He came by as I was loading the last of my tools into storage. Heard you're leaving. Time for a change of scenery. You know, I've seen a lot of guys go through what you went through. Most of them either drink themselves to death or do something stupid that lands them in prison. But not all of them. Some of them figure out how to channel that anger into something useful, turn it into strength instead of poison. I thought about that as I drove to the airport. Had I turned my anger into strength? Or had I just become another bitter man who'd destroyed everything around him to make himself feel better? The answer was probably both. The plane lifted off at sunset, carrying me away from 23 years of history. Below, the lights of my hometown grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared entirely. I'd left behind a failed marriage, a ruined friendship, and two kids who might never understand why their father had chosen revenge over reconciliation. But I'd also left behind the man who'd been naive enough to trust people who didn't deserve it. Sarah had texted me one last time before I boarded. I hope you're happy now. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't broken anymore either. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not a memoir or a confession, but a story about a man who'd lost everything and discovered that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are. The flight attendant asked if I needed anything. I looked out at the endless expanse of ocean below and smiled. No, I said, I think I have everything I need. 12 hours later, I stepped off the plane into the humid heat of Bangkok, carrying nothing but a suitcase and the hard-earned knowledge that some bridges are meant to be burned. Behind me in a small Rust Belt town that would probably never change, John was sitting in a jail cell, Sarah was starting over in Chicago, and Lisa was building an empire on the ashes of her enemies. They'd all moved on in their own ways, but I was the only one who'd moved forward. The taxi driver asked where I wanted to go. I gave him the address of a small hotel near the beach, a place where nobody knew my name or my story. First time in Thailand? He asked in broken English. First time anywhere, I said. And for the first time in months, that felt like the beginning of something good instead of the end of something broken. They called me a villain. Maybe they were right, but villains, I'd learned, are just heroes who got tired of losing.